From adolescence into early adulthood, alcohol had been more than just a drink for millions of people across the world. It was a companion, a ritual, a social lubricant, and for some, an escape. For many, it becomes such a central part of life that weeks, months, and even decades are measured not by achievements or milestones, but by how often they poured a glass, how often they blacked out, or how often they woke up wondering what they had done the night before. Researchers have a simple way of classifying chronic alcohol use. If someone regularly consumes 15 or more standard drinks in a single week, they fall into the category of heavy, long-term drinkers. When you imagine that stretched over not just a season, not just a year, but decades of life, the picture becomes clear. This isn't a casual pastime. It's a lifestyle that shapes who you are. The truth is that many people who live this way don't even recognize how deeply alcohol has woven itself into their identity. It's not until the bottles are put away, the glasses left empty, and the nights out replaced with sober evenings that the real weight of it all becomes visible. What's remarkable isn't only the physical change that follows. It's the psychological rebirth, the invisible rewiring of values, priorities, and pleasures that no hangover could ever prepare you for. And that's what this story's about. Because for all the obvious outcomes, better sleep, fewer embarrassing decisions, lower weight, the most life-altering changes often arrive slowly, sometimes only after a year or two. They don't come as fireworks. They come as subtle ripples. And eventually those ripples turn into tides that reshape the entire landscape of your existence. In the beginning, it's almost never easy. One of the cruelest tricks of alcohol is that it doesn't just provide artificial pleasure. It also rewires the brain to depend on that pleasure. Neurobiologists describe this in terms of dopamine, the brain's reward chemical. People who are naturally prone to restlessness, distraction, or difficulty feeling satisfied with ordinary life often fall into a cycle of craving intense stimulation. This can take the form of drugs, gambling, high adrenaline sports, or sexual risk-taking. But for countless people, nothing delivers that hit quite like alcohol. On the surface, drinking gives two gifts at once. It energizes the restless brain with stimulation, a false but powerful surge of motivation and joy. At the same time, it numbs the anxious mind, quieting fears, smoothing social interactions, and dulling awkwardness. For someone who feels constantly understimulated yet socially uncomfortable, this combination feels perfect. It's no wonder so many keep going back. But what starts as a short-term strategy for fun or relief quickly snowballs. Nights out become a requirement rather than an option. Ordinary dinners seem dull without a bottle on the table. Vacations revolve around finding bars rather than exploring landscapes. Family gatherings feel intolerable without a buzz to soften the tension. Slowly, alcohol doesn't just accompany experiences, it defines them. That's why quitting feels like a brutal stripping away of color. When the decision is finally made to stop, whether it comes from health scares, failed relationships, or simply exhaustion from living in cycles, the first sensation is not liberation, but boredom. Activities that once seemed thrilling lose their shine. Parties become repetitive and shallow. Conversations drag. Even food tastes strangely bland. The volume knob of life gets turned down, and suddenly everything feels muted. This is the stage where so many give up. Not because their body can't handle sobriety, but because their mind cannot tolerate the sudden emptiness. The excitement once supplied by alcohol is gone, and without it, the world appears dull, even meaningless. Holidays feel long and uncomfortable. Friends appear less interesting. Daily routines drag without bursts of intoxicated energy. The voice inside whispers constantly, "You were happier before, just go back." But here lies the paradox. What felt like fun before was not necessarily joy, it was stimulation. There's a difference, though it can be difficult to see when you're deep inside it. Alcohol creates excitement, unpredictability, intensity. True happiness, on the other hand, comes from satisfaction, connection, and stability. It takes time to notice the distinction. In the early months, sobriety exposes harsh truths. Many realized that the people they surrounded themselves with weren't genuine companions, but drinking partners. The hobbies they thought they loved weren't passions, just excuses to drink. The events they attended weren't about culture, art, or adventure. They were about access to alcohol. Without the haze, a person is forced to see which relationships are real, which pastimes matter, and which environments were never fulfilling in the first place. This recognition is uncomfortable. It feels like losing an identity. For years, maybe decades, alcohol shaped how you socialized, how you relaxed, how you celebrated, even how you coped with stress. Take that away, and suddenly the question emerges: who am I without this? The answer doesn't come quickly. It must be built. And that's why so many describe the first year of sobriety not as a triumphant journey, but as a slow, uncertain experiment in rediscovering what joy actually means. You begin testing activities. Some feel flat, others bring a surprising spark. A walk in nature, once dismissed as boring, reveals itself as grounding. Reading a book without distraction becomes deeply satisfying. Preparing meals with focus offers a new kind of pleasure. Little by little, simple things begin to matter again. Scientists explain that the brain, after years of dependency, can take 12 months or longer to restore its natural reward pathways. That means that patience is essential. The dullness of early sobriety isn't permanent. It's a recalibration. Like an overstimulated instrument finally returning to its natural tone, the mind must adjust before it can appreciate the subtler notes of life again. During this period, many discover that fun and excitement are not synonymous. Excitement is a spike, a rush, often accompanied by anxiety, unpredictability, or risk. Fun, in its truest sense, is quieter. It may lack fireworks, but it leaves behind contentment rather than regret. Real fun doesn't require recovery the next morning. And learning that difference becomes one of the most transformative realizations of a sober life. In fact, it's during this first stretch that the groundwork for a new identity is laid. Without the constant chase for stimulation, priorities start to shift. Conversations that once felt unbearable without a drink begin to show their true value, or their lack of it. Social interactions streamline. The people who remain close are the ones worth keeping. The places worth visiting are those that bring genuine joy, not just intoxication. For the first time, there is space to listen to what the self actually wants. What feels good not just in the moment, but in the hours, days, and weeks that follow. What creates energy rather than drains it? What activities align with the person you want to become, not just the person you were while numbing yourself? And it's here where the story truly begins. Because quitting alcohol is not just about subtraction. It's about transformation. It's about stepping out of a mirage and into clarity, even if at first that clarity is uncomfortably plain. The colors return, but they are different shades. Less neon, more natural. They are the hues of genuine satisfaction rather than artificial highs. This first phase is messy. It is boring. It is filled with temptations to return to the old cycle. Yet, if endured, it opens the door to a long series of unexpected changes. A person begins to see themselves not as a drinker trying not to drink, but as someone entirely different. And that shift, though fragile at first, becomes the seed of a new life. Sobriety is not a finish line, it's a starting point. The early struggles are not evidence of failure, but proof that the brain and body are healing, recalibrating, and learning to exist without the constant crutch of intoxication. It is the uncomfortable silence before a new melody begins. And once that melody starts, it carries a rhythm that no bottle could ever provide. For most people who have relied on alcohol for years, the decision to step away doesn't just change what goes into the body. It begins to transform the entire social structure that surrounds them. This is one of the least expected, but most powerful consequences of long-term sobriety. Because when the haze is gone and the stimulation fades, what's left behind is an honest reflection of who you actually connect with and what truly matters in your interactions. In the early months, the difference might feel brutal. Social events lose their spark. Parties once overflowing with laughter and noise suddenly feel empty, repetitive, or even pointless. The same jokes that once seemed hilarious may now feel shallow. People who appeared charismatic while everyone was buzzing with alcohol often reveal themselves as ordinary, sometimes even irritating. Without the shared intoxication, their charm evaporates, and the truth becomes hard to ignore. Much of what held those relationships together wasn't friendship, it was a bottle. This revelation cuts deep. Realizing that so many of the people in your life were only companions because of a shared habit can feel like betrayal. But it isn't betrayal. It's clarity. Those connections were never based on shared values or genuine care. They were based on mutual intoxication, on an artificial rhythm of excitement. Removing the alcohol simply strips away the illusion. That illusion is a powerful one. When intoxicated, every moment feels more significant. A laugh seems louder, a dance feels freer, a conversation appears profound. But in the cold light of sobriety, many of those moments reveal themselves for what they were. Fleeting bursts of chemically enhanced enthusiasm. That doesn't make them meaningless, but it does show how fragile they really were. Here's the paradox. At first, this realization can make life lonelier. Friends may fade, invitations may slow, weekends may feel empty compared to the buzzing chaos of bars and clubs. But in this space, something remarkable happens. Because the connections that remain, the ones that survive without alcohol, are stronger, deeper, and far more nourishing than any intoxicated bond could ever be. Imagine a conversation where every word is remembered, where laughter isn't sparked by slurred punchlines but by genuine humor, where comfort doesn't come from shared intoxication but from true trust. This is what begins to emerge when alcohol is removed. Friendships may be fewer, but they are real. They are not built on novelty, but on authenticity. And relationships? The shift can be even more profound. Alcohol often plays a double role in intimacy. It lowers inhibitions, creating a sense of closeness and vulnerability that feels authentic in the moment. But it also clouds judgment, erodes trust, and masks real emotions. Over time, this can breed distance rather than connection. In sobriety, intimacy changes. It may take longer to build, but when it does, it is sturdier. Commitment no longer feels like a trap, but like a choice made with clarity. This brings us to one of the most fascinating long-term changes: the shift from seeking novelty to seeking stability. For those who have lived in cycles of heavy drinking, excitement becomes synonymous with happiness. New parties, new faces, new adventures. These are the fuel. Yet beneath it lies a constant dissatisfaction, because stimulation is never the same as fulfillment. Once the cycle is broken, something else slowly takes its place. Instead of craving constant change, there comes a newfound appreciation for consistency. This doesn't happen overnight. At first, the absence of novelty feels suffocating. Weekends at home feel boring. Repeated routines feel lifeless. But gradually, as the brain heals, something flips. The quiet routine of a morning workout starts to feel rewarding. Preparing the same breakfast each day feels grounding. Reading a book every night before bed feels comforting. Repetition, once despised, becomes a source of strength. Why does this matter? Because repetition is the foundation of growth. Without consistency, habits never stick. Without steady effort, relationships don't deepen. Without daily practice, goals never materialize. For those who lived intoxicated, long-term commitment was nearly impossible. But sobriety flips the script. Suddenly, commitment isn't scary, it's satisfying. This shift has ripple effects across life. Careers stabilize. Projects once abandoned suddenly reach completion. Creative pursuits, once scattered, now have focus. Instead of starting 10 new things and finishing none, 1 or 2 meaningful endeavors grow roots. And when those endeavors grow, so does identity. Because here's the thing. Identity is not a fixed essence. It's built from repeated actions. The philosopher Aristotle said it clearly. You are what you repeatedly do. When alcohol dictates your habits, your identity becomes entangled with intoxication. But when sobriety dictates your habits, a new identity forms. You're no longer a drinker struggling to quit. You're someone who values clarity, health, focus, and commitment. That identity builds strength over time. This identity shift is subtle at first. Maybe it's just a preference for early mornings over late nights. Maybe it's valuing time with family more than time in bars. Maybe it's choosing books over cocktails. But every small decision is a brick. And after a year or two, you look back and realize you've built an entirely new life out of those bricks. One of the surprising discoveries is how much more energy becomes available when alcohol is removed. It isn't just that hangovers vanish. It's that mental space, once consumed by planning drinking sessions, recovering from them, or regretting them, is suddenly free. That free energy doesn't vanish. It gets redirected. For many, it flows into exercise, creative work, or learning. For others, it flows into relationships, family, or building businesses. The specifics differ, but the pattern is the same. When stimulation is no longer hijacked by alcohol, genuine passions have room to grow. But even beyond passions, there's something else, something more subtle. The emotional landscape changes. Without alcohol numbing discomfort, emotions rise to the surface raw and real. At first, this feels overwhelming. Stress feels sharper, sadness more acute, boredom more oppressive. But with time, the mind adapts. Emotional resilience strengthens. Instead of escaping feelings, you begin to process them. Instead of numbing conflict, you learn to resolve it. Instead of avoiding discomfort, you learn to carry it. This ability to sit with reality, to experience life without running away from it, becomes one of sobriety's greatest gifts. It builds patience. It builds perspective. It creates a sense of calm that no intoxicated rush can replace. Life may appear less exciting on the surface, but beneath it runs a deeper current of stability. And then comes the transformation in priorities. Nights of chaos lose their appeal. Constant novelty feels unnecessary. What matters more is building something that lasts, whether it's a career, a relationship, or simply a healthier version of yourself. The short-term thrill fades, but long-term joy emerges. This is why, in the second and third years of sobriety, people often describe a paradox. On the surface, their lives appear quieter, even boring. They see fewer people. They attend fewer events. They travel less. But inside, they feel more satisfied, more content, more fulfilled than ever. Because joy no longer comes from loud excitement. It comes from quiet stability. This quiet stability is not the end of the story. It's the foundation of it. From here, the possibilities expand in ways that intoxication never allowed. Instead of chasing stimulation, you begin creating. Instead of consuming, you begin building. Instead of escaping life, you begin engaging with it fully. And perhaps the most surprising part? The social world adapts. New friendships form, not around bottles, but around shared values. Old relationships heal, now built on honesty rather than drunken avoidance. Family interactions improve because patience and presence replace irritability and absence. Even professional networks shift. Suddenly, you're seen as more reliable, more focused, more trustworthy. Sobriety does not erase the past. The years spent drinking don't disappear. But they become context. They become a contrast against which the present shines more brightly. And the longer you stay sober, the more those contrasts sharpen. The person who once needed alcohol to feel alive becomes someone who no longer craves it at all. This isn't about moral superiority. It's about freedom. Freedom from the cycle of needing stimulation just to get through the day. Freedom from social illusions that crumble without intoxication. Freedom from constant self-doubt and regret. Freedom to live as someone new. And this freedom, though it looks plain to outsiders, feels profound from within. Because for the first time in years, maybe decades, life belongs entirely to you. When alcohol leaves a person's life, the absence isn't just about fewer hangovers or clearer mornings. It touches the very structure of how days unfold. What once seemed impossible, maintaining routines, building habits, sticking with commitments, suddenly becomes attainable. Not because life gets easier, but because the constant cycle of intoxication and recovery no longer disrupts everything in its path. For years, alcohol creates a strange rhythm. Nights blur together with celebrations, escapes, or numbing rituals. Mornings become battles against fatigue, headaches, and regret. Afternoons are weighed down by guilt, sluggishness, or cravings for the next drink. Even when someone believes they're functioning, the pattern quietly erodes their ability to maintain consistency. Everything becomes stop and start. Projects are launched with enthusiasm, then abandoned. Goals are set, then ignored. Commitments are made, then broken. Not out of laziness, but because the body and brain are constantly recovering from self-inflicted damage. Sobriety changes this. At first, The shift feels subtle. You wake up with more clarity. The fog that once hung over mornings begins to lift. Tasks that once felt daunting now seem manageable. But the deeper change comes later. When you realize that life no longer feels like it's constantly being reset. Progress, for the first time, sticks. Habits begin to form not in fits and bursts, but through steady repetition. One of the most powerful outcomes of long-term sobriety is the ability to finally build habits that last. Exercise becomes a prime example. For those who drank heavily, fitness routines often collapsed under the weight of exhaustion or late nights. Plans to jog in the morning vanished after nights of drinking. Gym memberships collected dust. Nutrition was sabotaged by cravings for greasy food after drinking sessions. But when alcohol is removed, energy returns, cravings fade, and the body naturally seeks movement. Running becomes consistent. Strength training develops. Walks in nature become routine. And slowly, fitness is no longer an aspiration, but a foundation of daily life. This ripple effect expands beyond physical health. Eating habits shift. Without alcohol disrupting blood sugar or triggering late-night binges, food choices become more deliberate. Instead of compulsively grabbing processed snacks, meals are chosen with care. The cycle of indulgence and regret is replaced by balance. It's not about perfection. It's about freedom from the compulsions that once hijacked behavior. Work also transforms. Productivity systems, time management hacks, and motivational tricks all pale in comparison to the simple gift of sobriety. With alcohol out of the equation, sleep becomes deeper, concentration sharper, and decision-making clearer. Projects that once felt overwhelming become possible. Creative energy, once dulled, flows more naturally. Long-term goals, once constantly derailed, finally move forward. It feels almost unfair, like life was designed to be this efficient all along, but alcohol kept pulling the brakes. And with these changes comes a deeper shift: the relationship with commitment itself. For years, alcohol-fueled living often breeds avoidance. Commitments, whether jobs, relationships, or projects, feel suffocating. The craving for novelty and stimulation makes staying in one place unbearable. Quitting one job for another, moving from city to city, drifting from one partner to the next. It feels like freedom in the moment. But it's actually instability. It's running from discomfort rather than building something through it. Sobriety flips this script. Without the constant pull toward stimulation, commitments start to feel rewarding rather than restrictive. Staying in one career long enough to build expertise feels satisfying. Nurturing one relationship deeply feels meaningful. Living in one place long enough to feel rooted brings peace. The thrill of constant novelty fades, replaced by the slower, steadier satisfaction of long-term growth. This change doesn't mean life becomes stagnant. It means growth is finally possible. Because growth, by definition, requires time. It requires patience. It requires consistency. Sobriety makes these possible in a way that drinking never could. There's also the psychological shift. Alcohol often keeps people in a cycle of self-criticism, regret over poor choices, shame from broken promises, anxiety from embarrassing nights out. This constant weight of guilt corrodes self-esteem. Without alcohol, the cycle breaks. You begin to trust yourself again. When you say you'll do something, you actually do it. That builds confidence. Confidence builds momentum, and momentum builds identity. Over time, this identity shift becomes profound. No longer is life defined by alcohol. No longer is a person a drinker trying to control drinking. They are someone entirely new. Someone who exercises daily, who works consistently, who eats consciously, who shows up when they say they will. The old identity, rooted in chaos and instability, is replaced by one built on reliability and clarity. This identity shift carries practical benefits too. Others begin to notice. Colleagues see dependability. Friends see trustworthiness. Partners see stability. Professional opportunities open up. Relationships strengthen. Even family dynamics improve. Not because of perfection, but because of consistency. The simple act of showing up, again and again, builds trust with others just as it builds trust with yourself. But perhaps the most surprising part is how enjoyable this consistency becomes. In the drinking years, repetition felt boring, even suffocating. Doing the same thing every day seemed like a prison. But in sobriety, repetition feels like freedom, because instead of chasing novelty, you're building mastery. Instead of seeking excitement, you're creating results. The routine that once seemed dull now becomes the very source of satisfaction. Consider how different it feels to end a day. In the drinking years, nights often ended with exhaustion, regret, or emptiness. In sobriety, nights end with accomplishment, even if small. Maybe it's the completion of a workout. Maybe it's finishing a chapter of a book. Maybe it's progress on a project. The satisfaction is quieter than intoxication, but far more lasting. And when stacked over weeks and months, this quiet satisfaction becomes a constant background hum of contentment. Sobriety also reshapes the relationship with time. Drinking compresses time into cycles of anticipation, intoxication, and recovery. Days blur together, weeks vanish, years disappear. In sobriety, time stretches. Each day is experienced fully. Mornings feel distinct from evenings. Weeks carry structure. Seasons regain texture. Instead of wondering where years have gone, you feel them. Life slows, not in a dull way, but in a way that allows presence. Presence becomes another gift of sobriety. Without intoxication, you are there. For conversations, for experiences, for your own thoughts. Instead of escaping reality, you engage with it. This engagement deepens relationships, sharpens awareness, and enhances gratitude. Ordinary moments, a quiet meal, a walk, a shared laugh, gain significance. They're not washed away by fog. They linger. This deepening presence strengthens resilience too. When challenges arise, there's no escape into a bottle. You face them. At first, this is uncomfortable. Stress feels sharper, sadness heavier, boredom more oppressive. But over time, this builds strength. You learn to endure discomfort, process emotions, and adapt. You become sturdier, calmer, less reactive. Life doesn't become easier, but you become stronger. And this strength creates stability in every area of life. Finances improve as money once spent on alcohol is saved or invested. Health improves as the body heals. Creativity blossoms as energy once wasted is redirected. Even spirituality, for those inclined, deepens. Because when you strip away distractions, you're left with the raw reality of existence. And facing that reality often awakens deeper questions, deeper gratitude, deeper meaning. The paradox is striking. Life appears quieter on the surface. Fewer parties, fewer chaotic adventures, fewer wild nights. But beneath the surface, life is richer, deeper, more substantial. Sobriety doesn't remove excitement, it redefines it. The excitement isn't in chaos anymore. It's in progress, in growth, in mastery, in love, in presence. And perhaps the most profound part is this. Sobriety reveals that happiness doesn't need to be chased. It's not hidden in novelty or stimulation. It's found in consistency, in patience, in showing up every day and building something meaningful. It's found in being able to look at your life and feel proud, not ashamed. This is the essence of long-term transformation. The person who once relied on alcohol for stimulation becomes someone who thrives without it. Someone who no longer fears boredom, but welcomes it as a gateway to creativity. Someone who no longer fears commitment, but embraces it as the foundation of growth. Someone who no longer escapes reality, but engages with it fully. There comes a point, often after the first year or two of living alcohol-free, when the dust finally settles. The turbulence of early withdrawal fades. The loneliness of losing party-based connections lessens. The discomfort of confronting raw emotions becomes manageable. And what emerges is something most people never expect. Life feels calm, sometimes so calm that it can even be described as boring. Yet within that calm lies a depth of satisfaction that intoxication never offered. This is one of sobriety's strangest paradoxes. To the outside world, a sober lifestyle looks uneventful. There are no wild stories of nights that spiraled into chaos. There are no impulsive adventures fueled by intoxication. There are fewer social events, fewer loud parties, fewer trips driven by the hunt for excitement. To outsiders, it may even look dull. But inside, it feels different. Inside, there is a steady current of peace, presence, and quiet joy that is far richer than fleeting stimulation ever was. Why does this paradox exist? It begins with how the brain interprets pleasure. Alcohol floods the mind with dopamine, creating the illusion that fun is happening simply because chemicals surge. But once those chemicals fade, so does the joy. What remains is emptiness, regret, or fatigue. Over years, the brain begins to equate happiness with stimulation, chasing one high after another, only to feel less satisfied each time. In sobriety, that cycle breaks. The brain relearns how to find contentment, not in spikes of pleasure, but in steady, lasting satisfaction. At first, this satisfaction feels underwhelming. Eating dinner without wine doesn't feel like a celebration. Attending a gathering without shots feels flat. Traveling without bar hopping feels empty. But over time, the subtle pleasures reveal themselves. The flavor of food becomes more vivid. Conversations become more meaningful. The memory of a trip remains clear, not fogged by forgotten nights. The simple act of waking up clear-headed on vacation, ready to explore fully, becomes its own reward. These small satisfactions stack, and as they stack, life takes on a new texture. The quiet becomes comforting. The repetition becomes grounding. The predictability becomes a gift. Where once you craved constant novelty, you now appreciate routine. Where once you ran from stability, you now embrace it. Where once boredom felt unbearable, you now recognize it as fertile ground for growth. This recognition transforms the definition of fun. Fun is no longer tied to chaos or risk. Fun is found in creating, in connecting, in learning, in building. It may not bring the same adrenaline rush, but it brings something better: lasting fulfillment. You don't wake up regretting true fun. You wake up wanting more of it. And here lies another paradox. The more comfortable you become with simplicity, the more expansive your life becomes. With stability comes freedom. Financial freedom, as money once poured into alcohol is now saved or invested. Time freedom, as hours once lost to hangovers are now spent on passions, Emotional freedom, as anxiety once masked by drinking, is now managed with clarity. Instead of chasing endless stimulation, you're free to pursue what truly matters. This freedom often leads to surprising discoveries. People who once defined themselves by nightlife or constant novelty begin exploring entirely new identities. They pick up hobbies they never considered before. They learn skills they once thought too difficult. They build businesses, nurture gardens, write books, learn instruments, or simply invest deeply in relationships. These pursuits may seem ordinary, but they carry a richness intoxication could never provide. What's remarkable is how much more meaningful commitment becomes. In the drinking years, long-term commitments felt suffocating. The thought of staying in one job, one relationship, or one place seemed unbearable. Sobriety rewires this. When you're no longer addicted to spikes of stimulation, stability feels nourishing. Commitment becomes a source of pride rather than fear. Sticking with a career, nurturing a long-term relationship, or building a home feels deeply satisfying. The very things that once felt like chains now feel like liberation. Of course, this transition isn't without challenges. There is an identity crisis that often arises. When half of your life was spent chasing excitement through alcohol, it can be disorienting to realize that much of what you thought was fun wasn't fun at all. It was just noise. Facing this truth can feel like a loss, like saying goodbye to a version of yourself. But it is also an invitation to meet the person underneath, the self that was hidden by intoxication for so long. And as you meet that self, you discover patience. Patience with boredom. Patience with growth. Patience with yourself. You stop expecting life to constantly entertain you. You begin to see value in the slow, in the steady, in the uneventful. And paradoxically, this acceptance of boredom opens the door to deeper fulfillment. Because boredom is not emptiness. Boredom is the absence of distraction. In that absence, real creativity, real intimacy, and real meaning have space to emerge. Think about the way a musician practices scales. Repetition, day after day, might look dull. But within that repetition lies mastery. Sobriety creates a similar environment. The daily routines may look uneventful, but they are building something lasting. A body that is healthier, a mind that is clearer, a career that is stronger, a relationship that is deeper. The results are not immediate, but they are profound. This is why, over time, many describe sobriety as the most productive period of their lives. Not because they suddenly gained superhuman energy, but because consistency finally became possible. Without the constant disruption of drinking, they could build habits and stick with them. They could commit to projects and finish them. They could plan for the future and actually follow through. No hack, no system, no shortcut can compete with this level of stability. And it's not just about work. It's about presence. Being present for family dinners without distraction. Being present in conversations without fog. Being present in experiences without regret. Sobriety doesn't just give you back time, it gives you back yourself. The deeper truth that emerges is this: novelty and stimulation were never true substitutes for happiness. They were distractions. Happiness isn't found in chasing the next thrill. It's found in cultivating what matters and staying with it long enough to see it grow. Sobriety strips away the illusions and forces you to confront this truth. At first, it feels like loss, but eventually, it feels like liberation. As the years pass, this liberation expands. Life doesn't just stabilize, it flourishes. The body heals, sometimes in ways you never expected. Energy returns, creativity blossoms, relationships strengthen. Even aging feels different, because instead of being accelerated by alcohol, it is embraced with clarity. There is a sense of ownership over your life that intoxication never allowed. And so the paradox holds. Life is quieter, yet richer, less dramatic, yet more meaningful. Fewer people, yet deeper connections, less excitement, yet more joy. On the surface, boring. Beneath the surface, extraordinary. This doesn't mean the journey is without struggles. Cravings can return, loneliness can creep in, doubt can whisper. But sobriety teaches resilience. It shows that discomfort isn't permanent, that emotions can be endured, that meaning is found not in escaping, but in engaging. And with each challenge overcome, strength grows. In the end, sobriety doesn't make life perfect. It makes life real. It strips away illusions, forcing you to face yourself and the world as they are. And in doing so, it reveals something unexpected. That reality, in its unfiltered form, is more fulfilling than any intoxication could ever be. So yes, a sober life may look boring from the outside. But for those who live it, it is anything but. It is full of presence, peace, and purpose. It is the quiet kind of happiness. The kind that doesn't shout, doesn't spike, doesn't vanish. It lingers, it endures, it grows. And in that growth, life becomes not just bearable, not just tolerable, but deeply, profoundly worthwhile.